On March 17, 1975, 17-year-old Roseann Marie Sturtz left her home in Hagerstown, Maryland, planning to walk to a nearby grocery store. It was a route she knew well, only a short distance from the apartment she shared with her family. She told her mother she would be back soon. It was a Monday afternoon, and nothing about the day suggested anything unusual, but Roseann never returned home. What began as a simple errand quickly became one of Washington County's longest-running cold cases. Roseann, known to friends and family as Rosie, was born in 1957. She was a junior at South Hagerstown High School, described as quiet, friendly, and responsible. She had no history of running away, no conflicts at school, and no behavioral issues that would indicate she might disappear voluntarily. At the time of her disappearance, she lived with her mother, younger siblings, and extended family members. Her routine was stable, and her social circle was small. When Roseann failed to return home within the expected time, her family grew worried. As night fell, concern turned into alarm. They began checking with neighbors, calling friends, and retracing the route she was believed to have taken. No one had seen her after she left the apartment. The next morning, her mother contacted the Hagerstown Police Department to report her missing. Investigators responded by canvassing the area. Officers searched the grocery store and surrounding businesses, including parking lots, alleyways, and nearby residential streets. Employees at the store did not recall seeing Roseann that day. Detectives interviewed residents along the route she would have walked, asking whether anyone had witnessed a struggle, a vehicle stopping abruptly, or a young woman being approached. No credible witnesses came forward. Because Roseann was a teenager, early speculation included the possibility that she had left willingly or gone to stay with friends. But as detectives reviewed her school attendance, personal belongings, and social habits, they found no indicators that she planned to leave home. Her clothing, school materials, and money remained untouched in her bedroom. She had no driver's license and no means of long-distance travel. This led investigators to treat her disappearance as suspicious. As days passed without leads, the Washington County Sheriff's Office joined the investigation. Officers expanded the search perimeter to wooded areas, fields, and abandoned structures. Bloodhounds were deployed to track her scent from her apartment, but the trail dissipated within a short distance. Search teams covered the immediate area repeatedly, finding no items linked to Roseann. Lists of known offenders in the region were cross-checked. Detectives interviewed individuals with histories of violence or sexual crimes. Many were eliminated quickly due to lack of proximity or conflicting alibis. Others were questioned multiple times over the following months. For more than a year, the case remained open but stagnant. Then, on September 10, 1976, 18 months after Roseann disappeared, a hunter discovered skeletal remains in a wooded area just outside Hagerstown, several miles from where Roseann had last been seen. The location was remote and heavily wooded, not easily visible from the nearest road. Detectives from Washington County responded to the scene. The remains were in an advanced stage of decomposition, consistent with exposure to the elements for more than a year. Clothing fragments and personal items were recovered nearby. Forensic examination confirmed that the remains belonged to a teenage female. Dental records were compared to those on file for Roseann Sturtz, and the medical examiner officially confirmed the identity. The cause of death was classified as homicide. Due to the condition of the remains, the exact manner of death could not be determined. However, investigators concluded that Roseann had not reached the location on foot. The distance from her home and the isolated nature of the area indicated she had been transported. Because her remains were found far from populated areas, detectives believed the killer had selected the location intentionally to prevent discovery. Following the identification, detectives reconstructed Roseann's final known movements. They revisited the route she had planned to walk, speaking again with witnesses who lived along the street in 1975. Several residents remembered seeing a vehicle parked in an unusual position near the grocery store around the same time Roseann disappeared. But descriptions varied, and none were detailed enough to identify the driver. Investigators revisited individuals initially questioned in 1975. Some were re-interviewed, and their backgrounds re-evaluated with updated investigative tools. Several persons of interest were identified men who lived in or frequented the Hagerstown area, some with histories of similar offenses in Maryland or nearby states. Despite the renewed investigative pressure, no suspect was conclusively linked to the crime. As the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds passed, the case was periodically reviewed by new investigators. Forensic advancements prompted attempts to extract additional evidence from the remains and collected items, but no trace DNA suitable for comparison was found. Because the homicide occurred in 1975, most of the original biological material was too degraded to be analyzed with early forensic methods. The case remained cold for decades. Washington County detectives continued to keep it active, aware that even small breakthroughs, new interviews, confessions, or modern forensic capabilities could eventually provide answers. Each time new investigative techniques became available, evidence from the case was re-examined. The crime scene location, photographs, and recovered personal objects were reviewed repeatedly. In the 2000s and 2010 seconds, advances in behavioral analysis and cold case methodology led detectives to compare the case to other unsolved homicides involving teenage girls in the region. None of the cases matched closely enough to establish a definitive connection. In the early 2020 seconds, investigators digitized the entire case file, updating Roseann's information in national databases such as NamUs and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Her records, photographs, and investigative notes were made accessible to other jurisdictions to identify potential links to offenders who had moved out of the region or committed crimes elsewhere. Cold case detectives also interviewed surviving members of Roseann's family, clarifying earlier statements and confirming known details about her habits and daily routine. This helped investigators reevaluate the likely timeline of her disappearance and refine the window of opportunity in which the abduction occurred. Although the identity of the person responsible for her death remains unknown, the case continues to be reviewed by investigators in Washington County. Detectives have stated publicly that they welcome any information from individuals who lived in the area in 1975 or who may have known people with unusual behavior or unexplained absences during that time. For the Sturtz family, the discovery of Roseann's remains in 1976 answered one question but left many others unresolved. For decades, they lived without knowing who had taken her life or why. Her case is remembered locally as a reminder of the importance of ongoing cold case efforts, and investigators note that even after 50 years, a single new piece of information could lead to the identification of her killer. The disappearance and homicide of Roseann Marie Sturtz remain officially unsolved. Her case, opened in March 1975 with a short walk to a grocery store, continues to stand as an active cold case in Washington County. Investigators maintain the commitment to pursue any new lead that could explain what happened along the route she never completed. On January 12, 1988, two highway workers with the Washington State Department of Transportation were performing routine maintenance along a rural stretch of State Route 504 near Toutle, Washington. As they walked along a gravel turnout, they noticed something in the brush just off the roadway. When they moved closer, they realized the object was human. The workers contacted the Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office, and deputies responded within minutes. Lying partially concealed in heavy vegetation was the body of a young woman. Her clothing was disheveled, and the condition of the scene indicated she had been left there intentionally. The victim was identified as 7-year-old Tracy Marie Whitney, missing since late December 1987. Tracy had last been seen in the Longview, Kelso area. Family members reported that she had struggled with periods of instability and had been living a transient lifestyle at the time of her disappearance. Although she kept contact with relatives periodically, she had not been heard from for several weeks. Her discovery ended the uncertainty about her whereabouts, but opened a homicide investigation that would take decades to solve. Tracy grew up in Washington State, where she lived with her family and attended local schools. She was known to be outgoing and creative, but she also dealt with personal challenges that affected her stability. By the late 1980 seconds, she moved between Pierce and Cowlitz counties. Her social circle included individuals who frequented downtown areas, shelters, and temporary residences. Detectives would later note that this made tracking her final days more difficult, as she had not maintained a consistent address. The autopsy revealed that Tracy had died from homicidal violence, with signs suggesting she had been assaulted before being killed. Due to the weather conditions and the time she had been outdoors, the autopsy could not determine her precise time of death, but the medical examiner estimated she had been deceased for several days before being found. Her clothing showed signs of a struggle, but no weapon was recovered at the scene. Detectives began reconstructing her movements during December 1987. Witness interviews established that Tracy had last been seen in the downtown Longview area around the week of Christmas. She had been in contact with several acquaintances shortly before vanishing. None of them reported seeing her in distress, and no one provided a clear account of her movements after late December. Detectives interviewed dozens of individuals, including those who lived in temporary camps, known hangouts, and low-income housing facilities. They attempted to determine whether Tracy had left willingly with someone or had been abducted. Investigators searched the area around her recovery site for any physical evidence. Footwear impressions, tire tracks, and fibers were documented. However, heavy rain had washed away many potential clues. Detectives canvassed nearby homes and businesses, but the remote location and limited traffic produced no eyewitnesses. The lack of leads made the early phase of the investigation challenging. During the first year of the investigation, detectives interviewed multiple persons of interest, men who had known Tracy, individuals with violent backgrounds, and individuals who had been in the area where her body was found. None of these interviews resulted in a suspect. Without viable forensic evidence or witness accounts connecting anyone directly to her homicide, the investigation slowed. By the early 1990 seconds, the case moved into cold case status. As forensic science evolved, Tracy's case was periodically re-examined. In the early 2000s, detectives submitted preserved evidence for DNA testing. At that time, DNA technology was still limited in its ability to analyze degraded samples. No usable profile was obtained. In the mid-2000s, when the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, expanded, investigators attempted to enter partial biological evidence. But again, the samples did not meet threshold quality. The case remained unsolved for more than 20 years. In 2010, the Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office formally reopened the investigation as part of a broader effort to review unsolved homicides. Cold case detectives reassessed all original interviews, scene photographs, and timeline data. They reevaluated known individuals connected to Tracy's social circle during the late 1980 seconds. Some persons of interest had since died. Others were located and re-interviewed. Detectives worked to eliminate individuals who had been initially suspected based on proximity or rumor. In 2018, new DNA extraction methods became available, specifically designed to detect small or degraded samples. Evidence from Tracy's case was again examined. Technicians were able to retrieve a partial DNA profile from preserved material. The improved sample was analyzed and eventually produced a male DNA profile strong enough to be uploaded to CODIS. In 2021, the DNA produced a match. The profile identified 4-year-old Charles Chuck Talbot, a man with prior convictions and a known history of violent behavior. Talbot had lived in Cowlitz County during the late 1980 seconds and had been in the same areas Tracy was known to frequent. He had not been considered a primary suspect in 1988 because he had not been connected to her at that time, and witnesses had not reported seeing him with her. Detectives began reconstructing Talbot's history. They learned he had an extensive criminal background, including offenses involving physical violence. Records showed he had relocated multiple times over the following decades. By the time investigators identified the DNA match, Talbot was living out of state. Cowlitz County cold case detectives requested assistance from law enforcement agencies in the state where Talbot resided. Investigators conducted interviews, gathered historical records, and obtained further DNA samples from Talbot through a search warrant to confirm the match. The results confirmed that his DNA was the profile found on evidence from Tracy Whitney's body. After compiling the timeline, witness interviews, forensic reports, and confirmed DNA evidence, detectives referred the case to the Cowlitz County Prosecutor's Office. Prosecutors reviewed the evidence and authorized an arrest warrant for Charles Talbot. In May 2022, after 34 years, Talbot was arrested and charged with the murder of Tracy Whitney. He was taken into custody without incident. Detectives announced that forensic genealogy and modern testing had been critical to solving the case. Following the arrest, investigators continued to examine whether Talbot might be connected to other unsolved violent offenses from the region during the 1,980 seconds. Detectives reached out to law enforcement in neighboring counties to compare DNA profiles and case details. As of the most recent updates, no additional matches have been publicly confirmed. For Tracy Whitney's family, the arrest brought long-awaited information. For decades, they had lived without knowing who was responsible for her death. Many relatives had passed away without answers. Surviving family members expressed gratitude to the investigators who continued to work the case despite the passage of time. The Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office noted that the case demonstrated the importance of preserving evidence and revisiting cold cases as technology advances. What had once been an unsolved homicide with no clear suspects was ultimately resolved through persistence, improved forensic science, and modern DNA analysis. Tracy Whitney's homicide, unsolved since 1988, was brought to a resolution more than 3 decades later. The identification of her killer closed one of the county's oldest cold cases and restored answers to a family that had waited for them for more than half a lifetime. The case now stands as an example of how renewed investigative approaches can bring closure even after decades of silence.